Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Friday Fundamental series of our webinars. My name is Steve, and I'm going to be your guide for today. And today I want to take a beginner's look at SoftPlan's material estimating module, what we call SoftList. Just want to let you know that this class will also be recorded. So if you missed something or want to review something that was covered, you could go to our website. And about sometime next week, we'll be posting this on our webpage, so you can review the seminars there. So to begin, I'm going to create a new project. It's going to be a very simple plan. It's going to be a garage plan. Now, when you create a new project in SoftPlan, by default, the Open 3D tab and Open SoftList tab shown here on the Create New Project dialog, those are going to be selected, and we're going to rely on those today, so we'll keep those active. I'll hit OK, and the project sets itself up. I have the three tabs: the main floor, a 3D tab, and a SoftList report tab called Standard Complete. To start off with, I'm going to go ahead and select Draw Wall and pick up a 2x4 siding wall, and just quickly sketch a perimeter of walls. I'll edit the dimensions that are appearing here. I'll make it a 20-foot by 28-foot garage. Redimension to straighten out those dimensions. This being a garage design, I want to increase the height of the garage. So I'm going to go up to the Edit menu, Wall Height, box in the plan, and reset the wall heights to be 10 feet. Then come up to Openings, pick up a 16-foot garage door, place it at the front or bottom of the screen. Locate a 3-foot man door, and I'll put it here at the back. And then I'll locate a casement window. Let's choose a 48 by 36 and put 3 of them in, one on each side, left, right, and back. I'm going to edit these windows and center them in the wall. I'll use a repeat edit here to center the others. This one will prompt me with a option because I can center that window between the door and the wall corner by choosing the Between Openings option, and that's not what I want to do here, so I won't check it. I'll just hit OK and then click on that one. They're now centered based on the dimensions that we now see. I'll switch to floor system mode. I want this to be a structural slab, so I'm going to come to floor system options and enable the default to structural slab, turn that on, hit OK. So when I come to draw slab, use an auto trace here, click in the middle of the plan, it would by default be a structural slab, have footings around it. Switch my drawing to roof mode. Quickly put a roof here through auto roof, and then apply gables front and back. From this point, I'm going to generate a 3D view or make it active. And from here, we can start seeing a few details perhaps that were not apparent from a 2D plan point of view. Namely, here's that the windows look too high, given that it is now a 10-foot wall. I want to lower the windows, and there's a tool in here under the Move menu called Align Opening Tops. And as the name implies, it allows me to align openings together. To use the tool, we click on, in this case, the door. I'll hit OK. This establishes a source item. Now if I click on each of the windows, they will modify their top position to be flush to the first object or the first window I picked, or in this case, door. So now all those windows are flush the top of the door. I also want to edit each of the openings. I'll start with the garage door, and I want to turn on exterior trim. Again, I'll use repeat edit to make quick work of this. Wheel around to get the other two windows. And so now I have exterior trim on all my openings. Let's now view the standard complete material report. So once I make that active, it's going to then give me a list of the materials in the little design I've created. Now I want to kind of split my screen. So to do that, if I right click on this tab and hit new vertical tab group, this places the report on one side, keeping my 3D and plan view on the other. I'll kind of drag this over just to give it a little more room for the report and a little less room for the 3D and plan. So what we're looking at here with the standard complete is a very detailed list of all the materials. So each material, it's giving the details of, well, the unit cost, the markup, material cost or total material cost, which is the addition of the unit cost and its markup. There's also the labor markup, total labor cost, and finally a total cost. If I take a look at my navigation, kind of scroll down to the bottom till we see the SoftList category. There are three standard reports. Well, actually, there's only one standard report, but it has three different layouts. If I click on standard summary, for example, this generates a standard summary report. Now it gives me the same quantities and total cost, but the information for each material is not as detailed. So here it's only giving me a unit cost and a labor cost. It's not giving me the markup columns for either. We'll continue developing or taking a look at the standard summary, not the standard complete. So I'm going to right click on the standard complete tab and just close it. Just leaves me just with the summary. And as you can kind of determine here that the drawing is a database of information used by SoftList to determine quantities of materials. Makes sense. And because all the material quantities are determined by the drawings, the accuracy of the material list is directly tied to the accuracy of the drawings. So if something is incorrectly defined or missing in the drawing, then that item will be either miscounted or missing altogether from your material report. So if we take a look at what we currently have, for example, wall framing, we have a quantity of wall plate. This being a structural slab or slab on grade, those wall plates are sitting on concrete. We need to define a pressure-treated bottom plate for those walls. If I come back to my floor plan view, switch it into drawing mode, I'll edit one of my walls, and from the edit dialog, there is this selections tab. In the selections tab, there's this property called P-treated plate or pressure-treated plate, which if I turn off the default and set its value to yes, this will change the bottom plate of that wall into a pressure-treated bottom plate. And if we're noticing here on the report side, we're now getting a quantity of pressure-treated wall plate. In addition to that, we're also getting sill gasket. And if you notice up above, there's a quantity of anchor bolts. I'll come back to my floor plan and use repeat edit to do the same change to the other three walls. And as we're making those changes to the floor plan, we'll notice that the quantities of those materials are changing. We're getting more pressure treated plate and less wall plate or non-pressure treated. Let's go back to the 3D view. And let's give it a little bit of a design flair here. We want to perhaps, if I edit the gable end material currently is equal to that of the wall below it. I want to change that. We'll turn off the default and change siding A into shake. So now we have shake siding in the gable end. Now if I scroll down here, we now have a quantity of shake siding. Back in the 3D, I'm going to edit the walls. And what I want to have here is I want to have part brick, part siding. So I'm going to change my 2x4 siding wall into the 2x4 brick siding wall. For the alignment, I'm going to choose to do a bearing to bearing alignment. And what we're noticing here is that we're going to get a little less siding. And if I scroll up, we're now getting a quantity of brick. Beside each heading, you'll see a little triangle. If I click on that triangle, it kind of collapses that category. This allows me to view the brick and the siding together, such that if I come back to my 3D tab and go to repeat edit to grab the other 3 walls, we could see right away how those quantities of brick and siding are changing as I make these changes on my drawing, or in this case, the 3D. As a transition wall, if the wall is defined properly, again, I'm going to edit one of these walls in 3D. If the wall is defined properly with its transition material, we'll have a transition tab when we edit the wall. This allows me to dictate the change of transition, where it transitions from brick to siding, that height. And I'm going to put it to 3 feet, 5.5 inches. That just puts it just below the trim of the window. And again, as we make those changes, we'll get a little bit more brick, a little less siding. I'll do repeat edit and grab the other 3 walls. I'm going to do another little change here, noticing the exterior door trim. Currently at 50 feet. If I come to my 3D, if you're not familiar, I'm going to use this binoculars button, which is a look at surface, so I can quickly zoom in to a particular surface by clicking on it with that tool. And I'm going to edit that door. And from the edit dialog, I'm going to go to the exterior trim tab. And if I enable custom trim, this gives me access to the stop at transition. So if we have a door with trim on a transition wall, we could turn that on. And what this does, as you can see, it stops the trim and then extends the brick to go to the edge of the opening. So we'll get a little less door trim. I'll do the same change to the man door out the side. I'll edit it. I'll enable custom trim and enable the stop at transition. So as long as I got things defined properly, I'm going to get a much more accurate material report. So the design looks good. I don't think I'm missing anything, or am I? I'm going to do a little trick here. if I, again, go to my SoftList reports in my navigation, there's one called Trade Contractors. I'm going to generate that. Now, the main difference here with the Trade Contractors report, if we take a look at, for example, the framing package, it's giving me a lineal footage of the exterior framed walls based on the wall's size, its width and height. Whereas in our standard report, it breaks down the actual framing components of that wall. So as we were looking at earlier, the amount of wall plates, both pressure treated and non-pressure treated, number of studs, headers, and all that stuff is defined within the wall. It's broken down piece by piece within our standard report. The other benefit of the Trade Contractors report, if we notice down here on the report output window, it's giving me warnings of things that I have forgotten to draw. So taking a look at those warnings, it says I have not drawn the ceiling board. There's no insulation in my slab, so main floor is not insulated. Should also point out that it's telling me I haven't used garage walls on my main floor. And I should discuss why that is. You've hopefully when you discover it on your own when you're drawing your house, there's a series of walls and there's also a series of garage wall equivalents. Now the main difference between garage walls and non-garage walls is the garage walls are not insulated. In my little example here, I intended for my garage to be insulated, so I used the normal house walls. So the error message about no garage walls found on my floor plan, I can ignore that. I realize that. But what I had neglected to do, for example, is add the ceiling board, the insulated slab. It says there's no interior, so flooring, baseboard, that's okay. We don't need those. There's also no plumbing or cabinets. Again, being a simple garage design, I can ignore those errors. However, there's no area as well. So that's important to note. So now that I've noticed these errors, I can come back to my floor plan and start adding these things that I have forgotten about. So first of all, we'll go to ceiling mode. Go to draw a ceiling, auto trace, puts in the ceiling. I also want to insulate my ceiling, so I'll do a ceiling insulation, auto trace, and I'll frame it with some ceiling joists. So if I come back to my Trade Contractors report, the errors are going to update. What else did I forget? So yeah, no insulation on the main and no area. That's the other one. So we come back to my drawing. Let's go to floor system mode, edit my slab, and enable the insulation. With insulation now enabled on my slab, back in my standard report, I now have a quantity of slab insulation shown right here. Back to the floor plan, I'll switch back to roof mode. Auto roof is there, but we need to add some framing, so we'll go with auto stick frame. Frames my roof. And finally, switch my mode to area mode, gross floor area, auto trace, click in the middle. What this includes when we add an area is right here, framing labor. So if I want to get an estimate of the labor included in framing the structure, I do need to add an area, or more specifically, the gross floor area. It's defined based on the square footage of the structure, which is defined through area mode. Next, so back in my standard summary report, we're going to take a look next at, well, if I scroll to the top, we'll see we have a building permit, architects and engineering fees. Well, for this simple design, we probably don't need the fees. we do need a building permit, but let's say it's not $500. To change these values, click on the Edit Prompt Variables button, and it brings forward this dialog. This allows me to change these things. So if I don't need, for example, the termite protection, I can turn that off, set that to no. Now I do want to include the building permit, so I'll leave that to yes, but I'm going to change its cost value. We'll say $300. But for the fees, we'll set those to no. We'll also set no the cleanup and final inspection. The other thing I want to point out here is this prompt on report generation at the bottom. I'm going to turn that on and hit OK. Now the first thing we'll notice here is that we'll no longer have architects or engineering fees, but we still have the building permit, though its cost is now changed to $300 as opposed to $500. Now, if I were to close this report and generate it from scratch, double click on it from the navigation, this dialog then appears before it's actually generated. This is what the prompt on report generation allows to occur. So if I want to make these changes before the report is shown, so I don't forget to modify them, I can turn that on so I am prompted with this dialog every time I run that report, allowing me to make those changes right off the get-go. So I can make those changes, hit OK, then the report is shown. Let's take a close look at how some of the materials are estimating. Monolithic footings, for example. Their current unit of measurement is in cubic yards. We want to change that. We don't estimate in cubic yards. We want to estimate in lineal length. I'm going to select the materials button at the top. And what this will do is bring up a kind of a large chart showing all the known or predetermined materials that the program ships with. I can do a search here for monolithic footings, but it's number 4 at the top there. So there's the material that counts monolithic footings. And if I were to edit it, it brings up this dialog, the material setup. So there's 2 changes we need to make here. The first one is the units, and we'll change that from cubic yards to feet. And the second change we need to do is how the math is done to calculate that quantity. So down here at the lower left is the calculation of its quantity. So if I'm just looking at lineal length, I no longer need a volume. So I'm going to start modifying how the math is involved to create that estimation. First and foremost is the coverage. It's 27 because there's 27 cubic feet in 1 cubic yard. So we don't need that. We'll delete that value. Footing area times footing depth also gives me a volume. I don't need that. So I'm going to remove footing depth and remove footing area. And what I need instead is the length. So what I've removed there are 2 what are called variables. Variables are known properties for the group at hand. This material, based on the heading, group slab, this material is based off of a group called slab. So the program configures a series of variables for known properties. And what we're looking for here is the length. So is there a variable that signifies the length of the slab edge? If we click on the button at the end of that field, this brings up a dialog that shows me all the known variables, and sure enough, one of the known properties is the length. We'll add that to the formula. Finally, under number of decimal places, I'm going to set that to 0. If I have 101.5, for example, I want to round up to the next whole value. Finally, come to accounting and just change the cost to reflect the new unit of measurement. So that's going to be $10 per foot, and for labor, it's $2 per foot. I'll hit OK and hit OK again, saving my changes. Close the material setup and the report will regenerate. Now looks like I've lost monolithic footings. It's no longer listing. Well, if I again notice on the report output, there's an error. If I double click on that error, it will bring up the material setup dialog where I just was, allow me to correct the mistake. Now the mistake here is that I still have the mathematical operator engaged, is still on. Length multiplied by something, although I never told it what to multiply it by. Hence the error value expected. Well, my intention is not to multiply length by anything, so I have to set that mathematical operator to none so it knows that I'm not looking to do any more math. Hit OK, save my changes. We now get an adequate quantity for my monolithic footings and no error. Let's take a look next at the insulation. We do a simple or a similar change here. Right now we've got square feet for the R13 wall insulation. I want to change that into the number of bags of insulation. Now I could come up to the materials button, find the R13 wall insulation and edit from that big chart of all the known materials, but a quick way to do this is to right click on the material's name and go to edit material. It's a shortcut way to bring up the material setup for the material you've selected. In this case, I want to change the units from square feet to bags. Now we notice here that bags is not a current unit of measurement. That's okay. If I click on the blank space at the top, I can then start typing a new unit of measurement. And as soon as I do that, that unit of measurement becomes available to select the next time I need to use it. So now I've got the appropriate unit of measurement. All I need to do is specify a coverage. Let's say one bag covers 60 square feet of R13 insulation. Finally, I come to accounting and change the cost to reflect the cost of one bag and the labor to install it. Hit OK, save my changes, and I now have a more appropriate method of listing my insulation, number of bags. You can do the same change for R20 insulation, or sorry, R32, change into the number of bags and so forth. Let's move on to, again, looking at our 3D. What I want to change next is add a little banding material between the top of the wall and below the shake siding. To do so, I'm going to come to my floor plan view, let's switch it back to drawing mode, and draw a banding. When I draw the banding, I can choose a profile, and I want this just to be a square profile. And then I can change the material that banding is going to be created from. There's one here called poly, so I'll choose that. I'll leave it on a manual trace, hit OK, and I'll click in one corner, left click in the other. I'll do a right mouse click to say I'm done drawing, so it just draws it at the front. And if I come to my 3D view, we can see the banding there. Now it's just above the brick, bottom of the siding. Well, I want to move that up. So I'm going to, here in my 3D view, click on the move command, grab that banding and just drag it up so it's between the siding and the shake. Now, if I look at my material report under exterior trim as an example, I don't see any new material for that banding board. So let's investigate why. If I come to the summary report and go to materials, I'm going to search for banding. So down here on the find field, I'll look for banding, and okay, it finds some banding. If I scroll down a bit, there's 3 of them there: stone, brick, and stucco, but no poly banding. Again, I defined that board by using the poly wall material. So what we're going to do is we're going to invent a new material that will adequately report or estimate that type of banding. To do so, rather than start from scratch, I'm just going to make a copy of the stucco banding and modify the copy. To make a copy, with that one selected, I'll hit the copy button. There'll be a message here: select location to insert material copy. I'll click on stucco banding again, so a copy of itself falls underneath itself. So I have 2 stucco bandings now. I'll click on the second one and edit it. And I'll rename it banding board. Feet, that's the appropriate unit of measurement. And the only thing I need to change here is deselect the stucco left over from the original, and in this case choose the poly, the material I chose to create or draw that banding with. I'll hit OK and hit OK again, saving my changes. Hit OK, and it's going to regenerate the report. However, I still do not see my banding board, but if I notice the report output, it's telling me why. In this case, it says that that material is not included in the layout. Now, what's the layout? The layout allows us to control where a material is to appear in the generated report, and I want to indicate that this new banding board material is to be included in the exterior trim category. To do that, again, I'll double click on the report output, the error that's shown there, and the program will reconfigure itself to show us the layout portion. You'll see layout is highlighted at the top. On the far right side, we see the banding board material. Anything that's still in bold indicates that's not yet in the layout. Anything that is grayed out or a little bit lighter color, it's already in the layout. So to add it, first of all, I'm going to scroll down till I get to the category that I want to add it to. In this case, is going to be the exterior trim. Now this is showing all of the materials, not necessarily those materials that are in the garage design itself, but any possible material that could be there. So we have the new banding board, and we just simply drag and drop it where we want it to be included. I'll say right under the splashboard of the wall trim. So that gets added to that location. I'll deselect the layout from the top, save my changes. The report then regenerates. I don't see the error anymore, so if I scroll down to the exterior trim, there's my new banding board material. Brand new material that I just added. Next thing we're going to look at is also with the layout, we can control the number of columns or what columns are to be displayed. If I click on the materials button again, this brings up the list of, there's about 550 or so odd materials here. But if we notice at the top left, we have 3 tabs: options, materials, and layouts. I'm going to go to layouts again. This brings up a similar dialog, although it looks a little different from what we were just looking at, but it's the same thing, which allows us to add new items to the layout. In this case, though, we want to remove a column. When we get to the layouts this way, we notice at the very top we have the choice of the various layouts that are included with this report: by floor, complete, and summary. In this case, we are dealing with the summary, so I'll select it from the top. And what I want to do here is I want to remove the labor column. So to do so, right click and delete column. With the labor cost gone, I don't want to forget about any labor values. So what I want to do is I want to, if I go to the unit cost, right click and say edit column, I'm allowed for that cost column to also include the labor and, as necessary, the labor markup. So the labor cost will kind of be hidden within the cost column itself. Hit OK. Hit OK again, save my changes. And the report is going to regenerate, and I've now lost that column. So the labor column is gone, just leaving with the unit cost. But again, that unit cost column also includes the labor rates. Okay, there's one more thing I want to go over. We've been asked a couple of times to have a report display certain types of information. I think the last example was they were looking for specific areas of just the surface material. So, you know, the area of the siding, the shake, the brick, and let's take our example here too. We'll also do the asphalt shingles. That's all they wanted. Well, that information's already given here in our report. We've already been looking at that. Here's the area of brick, area of siding, shake siding. That information's already displayed. But we want to condense that into just give me that specific information without all the others. We can do so by creating a brand new report. And this is how we do it. I'm going to come up to File and go to Project Options. From here, I'm going to locate the SoftList Report Configurations category. And I'm going to click on New. This will allow me to create a new report. I'll call it Exterior Finishes. Now, ideally, we make it out of a copy of an existing. I would likely want to copy the standard report. However, in this case, that would bring over all the 550 or so materials into my exterior finishes. And I only want 5 or 6 of them. So I'm not going to copy an existing. I'm going to leave this blank. Hit OK. Instead, I'm going to first come to the standard report and click on Configure. Again, this brings up the list of the 550 or so pre-configured materials. And I'm going to do a search for asphalt shingles. There they are. And if I scroll down a little bit, we'll also see that there's the exterior finishes. So we have brick, siding, stucco, etc. I want to borrow or copy those specific materials. This dialog also allows for multiple selections. So if I hold down my control key as I select materials, I can select multiple materials. You'll notice here that brick, and the same holds true for siding and stucco, but there's a few of them. These are, well, brick gable and brick walls. Those two accumulate into a third formula or a third material, simply labeled as brick. Without getting into too much detail, what happens here is that the quantity of brick on a gable end is calculated, and the different calculation is done for the quantity of brick on a wall. And each of those values are added together or accumulated together into the brick material. So if I'm going to borrow these, I have to grab all the accumulations that are included with the original. Same holds true for the siding, although there's a profiled walls. An extra one there. We'll do board and batten as well. And finally our shake. And I can continue selecting any number that I want to. That's enough for our example. With those selected, and I still have asphalt shingles selected, I'm going to hit the export button. And it'll ask me for a material name. I'll call it surface materials. I'll then hit OK and now come back to my exterior finishes and hit configure once again. Brings up the same list, although in this case, as I was alluding to, it's blank. There's nothing there. I'm starting from scratch. What I do here now, though, is import the materials that I exported previously. There they are. I click on the file, hit open, and I now get those materials in my new report. Now with the accumulate, before I get too carried away here, when we accumulate one material into another, it's basing the accumulation on its location within the list of all materials. And since I'm inserting these new, their location is now different. So before I get carried away here, I'm going to have to make a quick change. I'm going to edit gable bricks, or brick gable. And we'll first notice that it's set to an accumulate, but we have to remap it, if you will, to tell the brick in the gables to add itself to the brick material. I'll hit next to do the same for brick on walls. Save my changes. I want to do the same thing for the siding. So I'll edit siding gable, add it to siding, hit next. Do the same for siding walls. Add to siding. And there's an extra one here for siding because we can define a wall with a profile in it. And if we do so, we can set up the material that estimates it, or the material setup, a little bit differently. So there's a has profile option. So that's why there's an extra one here, but we do the same thing. We just want to add its total to the siding category. Hit OK. Now I would do the same for stucco and board and batten, but our example doesn't have any of those, so I'll shortcut that and just go back to shake siding. Our little design does have some shake siding there, so I want to add the shake siding gables to shake siding and do the same for the shake siding of walls, add it to shake siding. Now, with all that done, we also need to include those in a new layout. So we were looking previously with our standard report, we had 3 layouts. If I come to my layouts here in my new report, there are no layouts yet, so I have to create a new layout. I'll just call it listing. And then I could grab, and you can see I can also use multiple selection here with a combination of the Control or Shift keys, and I'll drag and drop all 6 of those materials into my new layout. It starts off with a new group. I'm going to call it surface areas. In this example, I do not need any description as a column, so I'll delete that column. I do not want the cost column, so I'll delete it. Same with the markup, labor, and the total column. Since I'm not having any totals, I do not need a subtotal row. To remove that, if I right-click on the group itself, I can select Edit Group and remove the group subtotal. I also don't want the column headings, so the name, quantity, and units. I can remove those. Those are really not beneficial, so I'll say, or turn those off and hit OK. I'm then going to change the font size. I'm going to make the surface area, or that group, excessively large. I'll say 48. I'll then click on one of the materials, the content, if you will, and also make it fairly large. I'll do 36. I'll then click on Fit Columns, and this will readjust the remaining columns and their new font size based off of the page size, which right now is 8.5 inches wide, as per the rule bar at the top. Once that is done, I can hit OK and OK again. That new report is now available in my SoftList category, so I could double click on exterior finishes, and that report is then generated. There it is. A couple of quick changes here. I didn't change how asphalt shingles are reported. They're still in bundles, not a big deal. Right click, edit material, and I can change the unit of measurement. We'll say from bundles to square feet. And then to change how it's calculated, all we need to do is remove the coverage. Hit OK, save the changes, and that gets regenerated based off the square footage. One final thing here is that if I want to display this information directly onto the floor plan, I can do so. If I click on the main floor plan here, come to File, then Import, SoftList Report, select where I want to insert it, choose the report I want to include, in this case the exterior finishes. I can choose the width, but 15 feet wide is going to be sufficient enough. Hit OK, and that report then generates. A couple of other little pieces of information. I perhaps want to center the title here, surface areas. Also, it looks like the surrounding box is a little bit too long. Well, that box dictates the size of paper of which the layout was configured for. So to change those two things, I'll click back on my exterior finishes and go to Layout. I'll first select surface areas as the group, and I could center justify by selecting this option. And then if I click on Page Setup, this button here, I can choose a custom size. I'll say 4 feet, or not 4 feet, but 4 inches. It's a piece of paper. I'll shorten it. And I also don't want any margins, so I'll set that to 0. Hit OK. That regenerates the report here. Save my changes. To generate the report that's already on my drawing, I can either erase it and redraw it, or if I right-click on it, there'll be the option to regenerate that report based on the new changes, as we see there. All right, so that concludes today's seminar. I hope you were able to learn a few of these tips and tricks from what was covered. But again, this session is going to be posted on our website in a few days, so you can review it there in its entirety. Again, thank you for joining me today. We certainly hope you'll enjoy us again in the future for future webinars. So once again, thank you for joining me, and have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.